X to the Z exhibit.
What's up, guys? It's Andy Frisella.
This is your boy Foul Munch.
This is Ryan Serhant.
This is Shingy.
Hi, it's Patrick
This is Sonia Narvatani.
This is Director X.
Hey everybody, I'm Forbes Riley.
Yo, this is Goldie.
This is Amberly Lago.
This is Chris Voss.
Michael Francis here.
Yo, this is Charlie Tuna.
Hey, what's up? It's Billy G.
And you're listening to The Run GpG
podcast.
Well, I'm going to go hang out and listen to David's next podcast from The Run GpG.
You might hear something you like. Peace.
My guest today is one of the most fascinating figures in the music industry. Clifford Price, better known as Goldie, is a British musician, producer, and DJ. Initially, he gained exposure as a cult status graffiti artist. However, he has become better known for his pioneering role as a musician during the 90s UK jungle, drum and bass, and breakbeat hardcore scenes. After releasing a variety of singles, he co-founded the legendary Metalheadz label and released several albums under his own name, including the iconic 1995 album Timeless, which entered the UK charts at number 7 and is considered one of the best-known breakbeat anthems of all time. Goldie has also appeared in several movies, including a James Bond film, The World Is Not Enough, Guy Ritchie, Snatch, and I am looking forward to discussing his very interesting life and incredible career. Goldie, welcome to the Run GpG podcast.
Hey, man. Hi. I'm really sorry about this. I don't want to disrespect the artist, but it's just a really, it's not a really good piece. I'm in my friend's penthouse, and I'm like, which way do I go here? And all my old canvases here, but they're all nude. So I'm like, let's stay away from the naked ladies today. So
yeah, kidding. Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that.
I know.
You're just in from Thailand, you mentioned.
I just got in. I got in on Friday, and then I played Friday night for 4 hours back to back with Randall at the Village Underground, which is a kind of pretty well-known joint in Shoreditch. And then I kind of couldn't sleep after that. Adrenaline. And I slept in the afternoon for like 3 hours. Then I drove to Leeds, which is like 3.5 there, 3.5 back. My driver's in LA, and I'm like, it's not the old days. I'm just going. It's like going back to 1990, where you're driving for very little money to go and do a gig, which was great money. But I drove for 7 hours and played for 2 hours and got back at 7 a.m. Sunday morning. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't like doing conventional things. And I think that I understand with Run and with you guys, like, who is this guy? If you stay around long enough within anything, you become back in fashion, or you kind of, Machiavellian or Renaissance and da-da-da. And it is what it is. I mean, there's certain things I sift through, and Nick Walker, who's a brother, an association with Tad's crew. My life began at 18, running around New York and meeting heroes that I'd seen in a book. And I think I always say to people, if you want to keep things interesting, yeah. So for those that don't know the timeline, and my very crucible of my existence as an artist is having a very shattered timeline. You kind of know roughly chronologically what happened and where you went and how things happened in your life. And it's when people go, tell us about your life. It's like that old accordion, that chestnut, it's like the same old thing. But if you just have to get different ways of telling it. And really, my story is a story of a boy who came from the care system and went to New York and met loads of other boys thinking he was this one individual, and met thousands of boys. The stories could actually engulf mine in the horror of what it's like to be young, drug-fueled, crazy, the separation from a different caste. We're talking about a society in New York that was built by island people that came in search of prosperity in New York and lived in the boroughs and built Manhattan. And why it's so relevant is that was the major A-list metropolis, of which probably the biggest phoenix we've ever realized has happened with hip-hop culture as a whole. Anything that culture is attached to is usually stuff that's not very nice, and it comes up out of the despair. It is the counter-culture to the pressure from society, which has been with us since we've first been enslaved. Now, I'm not here to rant on about Then we get into some BLM shit or whatever the it is. I'm mixed race. I'm half Jamaican, half Scottish. I've just grown up on the shoulder of giants, same as Nick. Loving a culture that forgived me for being odd and forgive me for loving the art so much from a society that was so detached from that. And it's powerful because from that very phoenix from hip hop culture, I look through New York as a kaleidoscope. It was looking through one lens. And you forget about Yonkers and you forget about New Jersey and you forget about LA and Philly and Gainesville and Jacksonville as a whole. But you get a zoom into that lens because you start recording videotapes of breakdancers and graffiti and art and condensing it into this before the internet. We're talking about video clips or like mixtapes of culture, all sewn together roughly on a VHS or a Betamax. And that's what you lived for. Mm-hmm. So when you get culture inverted without a timeline, you don't know, was this Gladys Knight and the Pips? Was Malcolm McLaren, was that before? When did that guy first do his head spin? Was Ken Swift wearing these red Puma States? Were they red Puma States? Were they Adidas? Were they suede? Look at the clip, try and zoom in, freeze it, pause it. So you get this culture. And weirdly enough, as I say this, and this is something which is really weird with my life, I had a massive deja vu about this very conversation. Yeah, I get that a lot. But I find it fascinating that I think once you get through this life and you find the spiritual self, through all of this mad shit that happens, and you find this mad stuff, deja vus become a little bit more frequent. They become a little less odd. Is it my life playing out in reverse? But it really is like, they're going back to the point. This is a story about a boy who had a remarkable experience. I could write a list of fucking people that I'd met or shared dinner with of the most crazy experiences, thinking this is a boy that came from Wolverhampton that no one would ever expect to get anywhere.
I need to ask you about this because, in talking about your upbringing, the crazy environment you're pretty open about, you've said that the music you make, you called drum and bass the uncle under the stairs that no one wants to welcome to the party because he'll tell you the truth. And it's an incredible quote. Can you expand on that as it relates to how you actually
I said
into
it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I said it yesterday, because they're trying to make this jungle documentary, drum and bass thing. And so many people get it wrong and people trying to label something when people are doing it, whether or not, I remember when Miles Davis first said, don't call this jazz, we're not jazz. But you get Coltrane saying it is jazz. The people that do it are the people that do it. The people that look on the inside will always try and label it. But the idea that this music, there is those uncles that turn up and they're like, can you not stay for that long because you're going to start like drinking and the kids like, I know they love you and they really into you, but you're going to smoke weed with them and you might tell them some that they don't want to know. And it's like, well, you know what I mean? What? Fucking Santa Claus. They know Santa Claus is not fucking real. And right now, with society, there isn't a god in a fucking room with a chair sitting down going, okay, you've been really good. So here's 10 virgins and, you're going to live in this wonderful candy floss chair for eternity. Man, your ass is going to fucking ache. Let's think theoretically about shit, kids. Your ass is going to ache in a fucking candy floss chair for eternity. You're going to want to get out. This chair's just too comfortable. The game's up with society, the overlord of society selling us the fucking lie. It's only when you get to this age, and I say to artists, as a species, man, as a species, we are the barbarians from within, and it's our purpose to be the uncles. It's our purpose to be dutiful, even when you know or you assume, not even taking the atheist path, which I'm not, but let's manage the fucking ego for a second. We are going to fucking die. We are already on the way out. The stars are burning at their brightest point, fading out, fading in, but they're burning. Legends are people that spend their life doing something. Miles Davis is a legend. Charles Mingus is a legend. Beethoven is a legend. Da Vinci is a legend. We're just bit players that get to push fucking keyboards and do stuff. And I always say that beyond that, I'm not computer literate, but I sure as hell over the shoulder of some guy can vicariously pull the best out of you, because that's the purpose of an artist, to work with different mediums, no matter how or what shape they come in. So in the answer to the uncle and the question of what that means is that the game's up. Tell the truth. At the end of the day, it's like, you know, my daughter knows there's a shifting of energy and that when you pass, you pass. And if we have gained some kind of consciousness within the last, in my existence, in the last 4 decades, 5 decades, some kind of plateau of consciousness, then maybe I can train, you know, my brain with ayahuasca or mushrooms or whatever the it is, so that the energy becomes conscious. And for so long, the ego goes, I don't want to be part of the one because I'm individual, I'm original. But yo, you're part of what? You're part of a bigger picture. And the idea of being part of the one, hey, wake up. So, but the idea of what's the best, leaving the best of people, you know, with all the technology, and it's like when I listen to new music and I listen to what kids are doing, I get the new generations, but I also understand that we just hurtled with this kind of crucible of ideas. We wound it up in this casting mold. We hit the hammer, we cast the gold in. We're hitting the 2000s and we're hitting 2020 and 2030 approaching. And we're folding time because technology is allowing us to fold time because we've never folded time before. Because from a basic perspective, we first started time travel, not by watching Doctor Who, by creating a sampler or something that can freeze time and replay it back to us. That's time travel. Because we need to understand what that really means. I can go back and we've been here for how many thousands of years? We've only been able to record audio for the last 100 years. 100 years. Yeah, that's not even your grandfather's dad. So when you put it into perspective, I thought about all of that, and I've always been very dutiful to what those recordings are going to be. If I want to play myself back to someone that's not family and I want to play my music to, I don't know, a guy in South America, at least they'll be able to understand the rhythmic harmony, even if he doesn't understand the language of it, as opposed to being some sellout, cop-out bull of something that's trying to make money that at the slightest sounded completely shit and sounded like an adult trying to act like a fucking child. Let the kids do the kid shit and let the adults be adults. And that's the difference. I think, so without going too far off piste, there is no gray area with me. The idea of an artist is to burn and to burn well and to try and do, you know, when you look at the masters, Raphael, Da Vinci, the masters, and you look at the amount of canvas time, real time, and you quantum that with screen time on one's phone, and you go, you've used 10 hours of screen time. What were you really fucking doing with your screen time? What were you really, really doing with that time? So I guess the lamenting for people that look at your show or people that look at me or other people, there's this lamenting for the 90s because they couldn't quite capture it because it didn't exist for them. So that's what I call the Motown era. It's like the Motown syndrome where we have become the Motown within the electronic music. But the difference is that we don't sound like Smokey Robinson. You know, how can you be involved in a genre where I can sit in the 90s, because we came from the 90s, and I can just turn 45 degrees and I can look at the 60s and I can go Toots and Martells, the early rise of Marley. You look at the Beatles, the Stones, all these bands that came out, Cream, great, okay, cool. Forward back to the 90s. Okay, now swivel again to 2020. It's 30 years difference. Same 30 years, either side. Yeah, 30 years. But I can play stuff in 2020 for a 5-hour set, let's say this weekend, and kids go, what the f*** is this tune, man? And you go, it's 25 years old. Doesn't sound like the Beatles, does it? And he sure as hell don't sound like fucking Smokey Robinson. Because the music genre itself, the big uncle, the music was made in the future then. And that's why drum and bass music as a genre, as much as it's misconstrued, is still the most powerful genre of music, electronic music ever made. And it still sits at the bottom rut of the ladder in regarding to its accessibility because, hey, reading wild style like a graffiti writer is difficult, man. Unless you know wild style and you know a cess letter or bio wild style, you know it's wild style. But you know what? This generation wants bubble letters. So we can paint bubble letters, and they're really well-balanced bubble letters, and they're executed really cool, and they're really balanced. But if you know a writer that writes really good wild style and you see his bubble letters, you go, hang on a minute, wow, those letters are really good. Like Love Pusher, for example. Been around a while, not an old school writer, clinical execution, but great bubble letters, but not Wildstar. But you know he's quite prolific as an artist to execute like that, as opposed to being bubble letters. And I think that's what's really important to my position, without going too far off piste, is very important that I serve culture. And I think that when rap became, about the cars you hide for a video that you didn't own, I was out. I'm like, I'm done. It ain't real for me. This isn't real. Drum and bass music is real for me because it's real struggle. And, the Roots is real and Farside is real and KRS-One is real. And you know what I mean? So, it's been part of my life. The B-boyism is a massive part of my life. And it's explained in a rather beautiful book called All Things Remembered, which was the second book that I did, which is it really talks about that stuff in detail.
You said so much there, and such a stream of consciousness.
Really?
No, well, but just your stream of consciousness. There's so much to unpack there. I mean, you talked about legends or people that dedicate their life to something. You talked about looking back with almost like a Renaissance feel to that time period. And to me and many, you were one of the original disruptors, a larger than life personality when you came on the scene. You were the full package. You had the gold teeth, the music, the attitude. Was that branding deliberate, or did that happen organically? Or was it organic,
What do you think? Listen, that's just my life. Goldilocks growing up, going to Miami, learning to make gold teeth. I was living in a house with, I went to Miami searching, walking up and down Washington and Ocean Drive, trying to find some trendy kind of Art Deco guys to work with, and like, get the fuck here, and my father lives in Carol City. Carol City's infamously Jamaican, and before I'd arrived there, you had like the Shower Posse and Rain, all these crazy Jamaican gangs that were interracial fighting and warring. And, I met Orlando Pleen walking around 179th Flea Market, which actually got demolished like 6 months ago. And I'm like, I saw this guy, New York Connection, the guy that does golds, Eddie, he works with Eddie's Gold. He was his brother. And, the story of Eddie's Gold is quite prolific. And Eddie's Golds, Eddie, the family, the five brothers came from Suriname, the first family to go to America to make gold teeth. Let's forget about all the trendies and all the new kids and all the stuff in Atlanta. These are the guys that started that. The brothers went to Jacksonville, Atlanta. This is in the 80s, late 80s. These guys were responsible for Just Ice. When Jay-Z was 17, he got his first gold front. And Eddie used to have a shop in the Coliseum in Brooklyn doing golds. And his brother, Orlando, was in Miami. And of course, I linked with Orlando and I learned the trade of golds and goldsmithing and making gold. And, real alchemy. You give me I get an oven and a centrifugal caster, and you give me a couple of ounces of gold and, give me some wax and a torch, and I'll make you that shit from the morning I wake up until I go to sleep, because I know how to do that. I know how to go from beginning to end. As opposed to you make the wax, you pass to the other guy passes to the caster goes to the finisher goes to the stone setter, We learned to do it top to bottom, and, jewelry smithing was the real alchemy. So you didn't pay for fucking front covers then. You just did what you did. And I think that when I look at, Tommy Hilfiger came back for fuck's sake in a weird way, but, we were doing shit, and I guess the people call it disruptors, they call it whatever. And I just hustled, man. I would sell canvases for clothes out of the back of PR companies, man. I'm crazy. And I caught sand. I was like, the sand, all the sand's falling out of your hand. You're like, I'm just being and hustling. And, I spend money standing outside clubs with my last 50 quid that I've just spent on cutting a dub plate, because I haven't sold enough weed. And I actually can say that I've never had a job since I was 17. I went to art school and I quit second year in foundation, and I never looked back. I just hustled. And then that was it. I just went to New York and hustled. It's been beautiful, and I think that the music and the gallery in Bangkok is incredible, because we own. A lot of people don't know, they'll go, "Oh my God, he's doing art now." I've been doing art since I was 17, man. Like, Art's my thing. It's the, when you learn graph, I always say that any graffiti writer that's seasoned, this contemporary thing is, it's easy for us. It's like, wow, it's like painting by numbers. It's easy. When you've learned the craft.
Yeah.
When you learn the craft of graffiti, I can give 100 cans I can say, here's 200 cans. What colors you want? Give me a list of colors. Okay, there you go. Here's 200 cans. There's a wall. Go on, you are students. You're in Foundation 2 now. You're goldsmiths. Go paint that 20-foot wall. It ain't going to come out like a graffiti writer, but I bet you any money the graffiti writer can go to that college and he can turn that upside down. And that's what's happening when you look at people like Saturno and how good they are on Procreate. There's all these new artists that are turning Procreate inside out because, culture challenges technology more than ever now, which is very important. And my diversification is real. It's like, okay, so I can't work computers, but I can write a score because I can sing music into my phone and I can get a guide that scores and I can start scoring it and I know what a score looks like and I can put all the strings in the top and all the middle violas in the middle and the bass sounds and the drums in the bottom. Okay, so that's what a score does. Okay, first violinist. Where's everyone in the orchestra? Okay, cool. So it's just about physicality for me, about, inverting your music for orchestra, which is, I've done it, 10 years ago, and I've done it time and time again with disrupting that stuff. And now it's kind of bearing fruit. People are realizing, new compositions can be translated into good composition and drummers can keep up now. And I saw that with Mingus. When Mingus made his opus that never got created, I thought I never wanted that to happen. Mingus created a prolific piece of work that was found in the basement of his flat he was evicted from. It's a beautiful documentary for those that want knowledge. It's called Below or Beneath the Underdog. And it's quite prolific because it couldn't happen in this modern age where one of the most prolific jazz musicians of his time in New York was evicted with a wheelbarrow carrying all of his scores out of a flat because he couldn't afford the rent. Because we've had our fair share of people like Sammy Davis Jr. being dying broke. So the idea of ownership within your masters and ownership with the creation is important. The record companies didn't go away. They had to diversify. Yeah. So without going too far off track, I've just navigated a physicality, could I have retired? Yes, I went to Thailand to retire. That didn't work out because something keeps talking to me and wanting to make music and wanting to do stuff. And weirdly enough, the new projects, Subjective is important because it challenges the bubble letter. It's like, okay, guys, so you took it to, okay, so you're celebrating Mother in Paris, and that's 22 years old. And you're celebrating Timeless because it's 25 years old, but you didn't get it at the time. So what was the lesson you learned from that? And you got criticized at the time, but people couldn't say anything because it was new. So they thought, let's jump on the bandwagon. Because if they like it, we like it. There's no internet. You're putting an album that gets awards that was up against, that first major award with best album, the Mobos, and best jungle album, because they couldn't find any other category to name it, was he was up against Jamiroquai and Destiny's Child, and it was timeless. It was just weird. It was like the odd uncle, right? So it's all right for people to look back on it in retrospect, but this music, the club, Blue Note, what I brought with me, it wasn't just an artist making an album. It was a reflection of a society and a massive change what was happening at the time.
In listening to you, it surprises me that it sounds like you're somewhat surprised at the influence you had on modern day creatives and influencers. Like, I grew up with your music in the 90s. I was a DJ for many years. I told you this, you mentioned Travis Scott and some others and whatever, but you had such a big influence on not just the music scene, but on culture in a way. And I find that, and you touched on creativity, true creatives never stop creating, right? You're making the art, you're making the music, you've got projects. Two things here. Where do you find inspiration, and what's your creative process look like?
I notice, but the trick is not to be driven by the ego in the way that most artists do. That 90s version of me, my ego would enter the room before I did. Mm-hmm. And then the entourage would be after me. And I get all of that shit, and the cars and the Ferraris and the Bentleys, and having all of that stuff and getting rid of all of that stuff. Had it and done it. You know, blew 3 Ferrari engines because it was like too fast. Done it all. But you realize that richness isn't wealth. And I actually wouldn't change anything. You have to make the mistakes. You have to understand what's right. But there are no mistakes. It's just a preordained path of which way you have to go and move and navigate through it. It's like my journey's been really long because I need to walk around the outside. Walking directly to the center is not going to teach me anything. It's like a woman that or a guy that goes into yoga and they're really flexible because they do ballet and they can do all of the moves. There's no learning in that. For their journey is completely different because, you know, and it's validated. Their journey is valid too. But the idea of being inflexible is like, my mind's not flexible. I can't adapt. Well, you've got to expand your mind. You've got to think outside the box. I wasn't prepared to make Timeless, so I made Mother. Mother still is and should be the kind of thing in the modern age that should be a black opera that should be played at the Guggenheim with a full cast of 80-piece orchestra and full production. It should be. Because it's the blackest arts. It's the story of real traumatic coherence between a child looking at himself in third party of how he is as a subject matter and what birth and death is, and the archetype of, you know, building and designing something like that, which made no sense to the general public. And Bowie, God bless him, said it's a masterpiece purely because you're sticking to what you believe in. It was his version of Low, if you like, in the way that this is the lamenting towards a mother's love that you never had. You know, that resonates and it comes to fruition as an artist in its purest form when you come back from America and you go into the Chapel of Rest and you see a body there that she's no longer present, and you play the said record to her as promised and sit there, bawling your eyes out, wailing, in fact, playing this opus of 1 hour from start to finish, and to feel the cathartic process of what it is, what it means to me. So when you said, what is a creative process? The creative process is us admitting and trying to find who we really are. I know very, very little now than I ever did, in a weird way, because the other stuff's material, but understanding and finding a calmness of that. Okay, so the energy is going to move. And here's the zoom into the lens for you guys, of the creatives. What if there is nothing? What if that is it? And this is the memory of it all. This is it. So let's forget the panic and the kind of the false setups of belief systems of, you know, let's have 20 Hail Marys and, you know, we just think about it next time. Maybe if this is that, if we've come from nothing, then maybe we can become something else after. But it wasn't what they said it was in the book that they told us it was. Because it's purely evolution of the spirit. It's evolution of that oneness. So the idea for me is hell, as in your terms of what you call from beginning to end of our existence in the human form, is not being able to remember any of it. And the heaven is maybe creating some kind of conscious stream that maybe, like what ayahuasca teaches us and the mother drug, there's another realm that vibrates in a different place. And it's not part of the physical, which is not. So the idea of we are tipping the iceberg consciously as a race, as a species, is very important to me. So let me just bring that back into the creative source. For me, I listen to the inner child. I listen to that, what I call the spirit, to be able to, okay, so that's the kid that we always hid away. And, you know, it's what I learned from the Hoffman process and what I learned in my daily practice of trying to do stuff. And I get it. It doesn't mean I don't F and blind. Doesn't mean I don't get the occasional, I'm going to fucking tear his head off. Doesn't mean I'm going to go and sit and just hug trees. I'm trying to better. Today, I want to be a better version of the person I was yesterday. And if making music and art keeps my validation of that intact, I don't mind, because so many of my heroes died as an afterfact, and they became famous when they were dead, and their families profited from it. I'm not yet, because I want to make it when I'm alive. And I guess that's still part of the ego. But I'm making sure there's enough beautiful paintings that are in the home that we're going to be all right, kids. We're going to be good. But what would you want? What would anyone want? Would you want to leave just, he died, yeah. He just left a lot of photographs, though. Well, there's just some really funny memes. Well, what did he do, though? Well, 10 hours screen time a day. Yeah, but did he paint anything? Not really. Did he make anything physically? He left a bit of money to charity. Okay, what's the start? I think there's a lot of production and a lot of producing nothing. So I think, what do we need to produce for ourselves is hope, giving us something which you can't really weigh. If it helps someone, or, I'm not going to sift through DMs of, hey man, can you tell me what you think of this? You should know what I think of this. You should know that it's not good enough, or you should know that this is the best. You should know that. So act on that. You don't need validation from me, because I didn't seek it out from anyone else, apart from my heroes and peers that I went, I want to give them this, and they're going to play it, and I'm going to hear it. That's where it comes on the back end, not on you just giving it to them, because you've got to give it to them, and it's got to go through that. They're going to play it. It's the outcome, not the pre-com. Do you know what I mean? So it's important to remind artists that are moving forward that you really need to put the work in, man. It's like, it's really weird. Me and my wife, we laugh about it. Like, I didn't ask for 230,000 followers all of a sudden. I think it went exponentially from last year. I think it was like 50,000. And he just went mad for some mad reason. He just went nuts. And I think it's because I just took the piss out of it, because what it really is. You do a heartfelt thing. Hey, man, listen, can you just go and check this guy here? Because he's got terminal cancer and they're going to die. And you got 8 likes. And then you put a fucking hat on like I did this morning. And then you go, here you go, 52,000 likes. They've gone mad. The world's fucking gone mad. But within that madness, somewhere, there's a sanity within us that we think is mad. And it's like, no, it's actually, we're all fucking mad. But the idea of having some kind of sanity within the plan, within the chaos, there's actually a pattern if you can follow it. And I think we just have to kind of get our own rhythms and patterns that are kind of slightly outside of this. Going to yoga is important. I'm a yogi, but I'm not fucking master. I'm like, oh my God, what shall I do? I've got yogi masters. I've got people that I go to that are like, as we say, too many Indians, too many cowboys, not enough Indians. The idea of delegation is important to try and be mindful. And also people go, no, well, it's kind of, yoga is slightly elitist, and there should be better programs for young kids to get in there in the school holidays, where give up 2 rows of your back row, man. You're not going to make any more money, guys, in your yoga studio. Let some urban kids in. Why not? Sonny Rollins did yoga. So did Quincy Jones. So did Abdul-Jabbar. You know what I mean? It's like, there's a lot of people forget that this thing's been around for 5,000 years. And all it does, what yoga really does, which would just brought it around to yoga because it's part of the creative process, is it just clears the lens. Yeah. It clears the lens for you to look through clearly and see something and go, hang on a minute, now I can think this out a little bit now. But yeah, I mean, I think about it, I'm fascinated with the fact that how long, am I going to squeeze 30 out of this? What did I achieve in the last 30? I've achieved more in the last 5 than I've done in the last 20. And I'm like, okay, that's good then. That's a good sign. It's when people look through the lens and they go, Blue Note. Well, it was all the way down here. And it was those sets of pictures you see are only actually over a 2-week period. I could say the same with Subway Art, the book. Dundee, Hand of Doom, the big whole cars. They were done when New York was on strike in that period. It's like 6 weeks in New York. Not over the 40 years of how long we've had graffiti, but those prolific trains were captured Isn't that weird that those moments of time that were captured, you can capture everything now? So what's going to be important if you can capture everything? Not much. But someone that understood that was Virgil. He understood to capture culture through a baggage company, to capture culture and roll the Trojan horse through that, to understand through his lens and looking and getting an idea of focus through other people's cultures, whether it was skateboarding, whether it was Pyrex, whether it was that. You know, and those are the people I admire and still admire that gave 40 to be 40s plus, just that young, and to have done that much work. You know, there's prolific and there's goddamn prolific. And I think that for me is like, it's at a different level of prolific. And I think he wasn't of this planet in that respect. So I think I learned a lot in that process of what we've done. I think the project drops next month, Metalheadz.
I see that. I'm actually super excited about it. You know, you've talked about yoga being helpful for you. Do you find in creating music, what gives you peace? You know, it's kind of a broad stroke, you know, question, but
I guess what gives me peace is I'm watching these two girls make cooking and doing stuff, and you know, and stuff that I didn't think would give me as much comfort. You know, it's just, you know, I'm about to be a grandfather. You know, and I just spoke to Groove Rider today, and I said, "Do you remember when I called you when Chance was born? I was on the motorway crying my eyes. I go, oh my God, my daughter. Somebody knows my daughter. It's like I had other kids, but I had a daughter, you know, and now she's about to give birth. You know, it's due tomorrow. And by the time this goes out and it's edited, she will be on the planet."
And I just might note really quick, my daughter is getting married, which makes me feel really old for one thing. So I know how, I you know, not in the same, you know, but kind of in the same, our headspace is kind of in the same spot, you know.
It's in the same spot. I mean, you know what? I think that what gives me this peace is we've maneuvered ourselves. You know, I know you guys, my wife has an unbelievable pajama company called Siamese Dreams. You should check it out. It's ridiculous. But just the way that, you know, people, you adapt to your environment. And you're looking at like artists in Thailand that are creating this, you know, all made in Thailand. And I think it's about that, like being in Thailand and creating this other music. You know, Journeyman was the first album that was made in Thailand. And it was at the back end of, that's it. So you don't need to make an album about trauma. You need to make an album about celebrating the sun. Well, that's that album. That's what the Journeyman is. You've got to this point, and it's an album that's for me up there. I mean, Timeless will always be timeless because it's, you know, it's political in the way that it's technology coinciding with time, and it's all of that at that axiom. But whereas Journeyman, pound for pound, it's actually got more ballads on it. It's actually got more song. It's got more structure. It's got more. But it's obviously 25 years later. But the thing about Journeyman is that when you listen to Journeyman in 5 or 10 years' time, you realize it's in its own place. And I think that's what creative space does. There's a quote, I always looked at quotes and I thought, Spike Milligan has a great quote. He's a very famous comedian in England. And he said we were playing charades on a boat, and we had to put on, you know, we had to guess who this person was. And this guy didn't, he was English, but he didn't understand who he was. He was like, who is he? He's English, he's a comedian. He goes, okay, he's got a famous gravestone. And I you know, didn't realize that this famous this gravestone or tombstone says, I told you I was poorly. You know what I mean? I told you I was sick. You know what I mean? And I think I think that's really funny because it's a beautiful anecdote. But I think one of my quote is a truthful idea lasts in the honesty of time. I could well imagine that being on my tombstone. God forbid, touch wood, it's not going to be for another 30. But a truthful idea lasts in the honesty of time. So if you create something that you really truly believe in, that it will last. It's like, that's why jazz is jazz. It's why I can listen to Nemu by Coltrane. It never gets old. I can listen to Miles from India. It never gets old. I can listen to Pat Metheny over and over again. You know, First Circle, Miniano, you know, God, Muna, so many, because it's in its own space. And being creative is about doing that. So from a physicality point of view, hiking up the mountains, meditating up in the mountains, getting in the lake, floating away. You know, I had this wonderful experience of, you know, I've got a video that I still haven't edited together yet. And I don't know, I just didn't get around to it. And it's, how ironic is it that I got two divers that live in a village where I live in Phuket. And they're from Switzerland. There's two divers, really good divers. And we carried, you know, 4K up this mountain, all the air tanks, just so I can get into this lake and film me swimming around with a weighted belt just to make an Adrift video. Because Adrift, you know, I found this lake that was this Kiwi found this lake, and it's like, you've got to check this place out. And we went up there with a drone and we started filming with this drone, and there's just this little tadpole swimming in this lake from above. But it's like looking at a Pyrex dish with this mirror. And it's ironic because when I created that piece of music, it was about addiction and wanting to, you know, super high, you know, got this paper boat and all the turbulent shores, and I put the boat in the water and I blow it and it goes away from the land, just take me somewhere peaceful. And it finally gets to its highest point, you know, off its head, off my head, in the middle of this lake where it can't see any shoreline, and it's just still. And then the vocal comes in right in the crescendo of Adrift, and one little bit of wind just catches you and brings you back before you OD, or it brings you back to the shoreline. How ironic is it that I get to shoot this video, and I haven't edited some amazing footage of me underwater, and you know, the words written on paper and the ink holding, the ink dissolving in the water. But the idea of having it in the tank, having this thing, I'll go back to Thailand and I'll sit with Zero T and I'll just, you know, me and Kian will edit it. We've got all the parts. And I'm like, it's like wine. It's just festering. So when I go and look at it now, it's like sound. It matures in your mind of how you put it together. And it's really beautiful because it's in sobriety as opposed to, you know, not total sobriety, but it's the sobriety that's way off what it was. But the idea of having this beautiful piece, that brings me peace. Because I can go to the center of that lake, see all of the shoreline, just float with Adrift in my hands going, you manifested this.
Listen, it sounds incredible, and we need to make that video happen. We have to make that video happen. It sounds unbelievable.
No worries.
You know, of all the notable collaborations and, you know, your career, is there anything that stands out as notable, or a period of time maybe in your career that just says that was it for me? A career highlight, something like a collaboration, someone you worked with maybe that
Bowie was incredible. KRS-One in the Hit Factory in New York was incredible.
Yeah.
You know, watching KRS-One walk in, this is a guy that was on The Bridge Is Over, you know, walking in the studio, and I've written this piece of music, we play for this, you know, and I listened to the KRS-One track and I'm like, what a piece of music. What a track, you know, way ahead of its time. You know, I think the Bowie thing is really important because, again, manifestation. I got played for the studio from his mom's house to the center. You know, we just finished his first album. You know, Mel Gaynor, Simple Minds, world-class band, huge, a massive band. Mel Gaynor's the drummer, and Mel was having a big change. I think he was having a divorce at the time, and I got this studio. It's in St. Anne's Court. You know, come and check it out. Maybe you want to, you know. On that first floor is Bowie's picture in a trilby from 1977. He made Space Oddity in that building. So the idea of being in this place, they're all of a sudden like, Bowie was here? Yeah, you don't know. Yeah, he made Space Oddity. That's why the picture's there. And it's got a plaque outside. You don't see it. And then getting Bowie, you know, through fax correspondence we'd had. And you know, there was an 8-week period where he came to the club and he wanted to hang out, and everyone left him alone at the Blue Note while he listened. His music blew his mind. And of course, Earthling came, which weirdly enough was celebrated this week. But the influence of drum and bass music on Earthling was prolific. But the idea of writing a ballad for him, and I wrote it over a weekend. I just had this fascinating experience, and I woke up with a record mailer next to me with this unbelievable poem, and completely forgot that I'd written it. And my handwriting's pretty mental as a graffiti writer. It's all capital letters, and it was beautiful, ornate. And I remember Bowie came in, the first thing he sparked up, and I looked at Playford like, are you going to tell him? He couldn't say anything because he's the Duke. You can't say anything to him. And anyway, Barry just carried on smoking, and he went, "Are you ready, guys?" And he went in the booth at the back of the studio. I was like 3 windows, and went in there and started smoking. He started filling up with smoke, and he just got this white gorilla coming through the mist singing. And there was truth. And I think that piece, as one of the darkest and most beautiful pieces of music I've ever done, which follows Mother on Sound's Return. So, a very prolific moment because it was something that he believed in. I mean, it's actually 160 BPM. It could have been a drum and bass tune at any point. But I was just like, no, I'm going to make a ballad. And he said, I really admire that you're just sticking to your guns. He so wanted to do a D&B. I'm not doing it, David. No, I want to do a ballad. I wanted to do like Eno Low, and we did that. And he loved it.
Are you a new real estate agent or thinking about getting a real estate license? If so, you're going to want to ask about the Greater Property Group's Agent Scholarship Program. Why pay for the cost of the course yourself when the Greater Property Group will subsidize the cost for you? Make sure you reach out and get all the details on the Greater Property Group's Agent Scholarship Program. I have a question. It just came to me now as we're talking about, these moments. And on Clubhouse, I shared a stage with you and Virgil. Virgil to me had a big impact on me. I don't know how well you knew him, but just your thoughts on him.
Just not of this planet. I don't know if he even knew it. I think he knew it in the end. He wasn't just glanced by it. It's just, the conversations that I had with him. And, I think in the Clubhouse thing, he was like, "Go on, tell him, G, tell him what you told me, tell him the story." He's real. I've never met a more humble human being. That's why I don't think he's a human. I think he's of another species, man, of another kind. And the prolific. I'd spoken a year earlier about my heart condition, and not once did he ever say, "Hey, man, I'm ill, I'm going to die if I've got cancer of the heart." Not once. I mean, what kind of man does it take to be that humble? I'd have this PVC, a peculiar vascular condition, for a very long time. And it comes and goes. And, and once I knew what it was, you can kind of, okay, you manage it. You kind of, okay. So you don't cane it, and you exercise, you do yoga, and you open your heart up, and you got, this is a young heart. It's a young heart coming through an old one, maybe. And they're clashing. The drummers are not in time. And it's quite common with athletes, apparently. I don't know. It's weird. I'm no athlete, but I found it really unreal knowing that he had this thing that he kept so close, excuse the pun, to his heart. But even doing the show, and he said to me, "Come to Paris and do the show," and me and Coco and Mika came. Mika went there, and they looked after us, and he was so into the label. It was like he was so into the icon of Metalheadz, and tell me about the mixtapes, tell me about chemistry, and tell me about the, and he's listening to chemistry and mixtapes. And I think what happened a year and a half, 6 months before that was he posted some Off-White trainer on top of a Metalheadz tin box. And I'm like, everyone got freaked out. Like, I cannot compute. New generation do not understand. The fact that he unboxed, and we spoke a lot about the Trojan horse. And I've always been a big believer in the Trojan horse. If you can get inside the Trojan horse, you can wheel the culture through, and you can get someone else to carry it. Let someone else do the heavy lifting. The idea of having culture in the front of a major fashion icon and let them notice culture. And for the record, he said, I want it noted that Metalheadz is part of that culture, along with hip hop culture and crazes, along with Taekwondo and martial arts and the whole Chicago martial arts scene before the Panthers. All of this really intricate stuff, from Lupe Fiasco to Jizza. Hearing Dasai Menace, and I said to him, "Look, I've got some amazing music for this." And Benji, God bless Benji for, Benji was, is to this day, Virgil's right-hand man, without a shadow of a doubt, because he knew everything that he wanted. He always tapped into Benji, the oracle. And Benji said, "We're going to make this work." And the idea of Heads being involved culturally, I just can't thank the universe and him enough. We're in London. We're going to go and, we're in the window of Bond Street, LV, and the record box and the USB and the bag. And it's insane. And going to Paris and seeing it unveil was a massive moment. I think they're putting a film together now, which is going to be insane because there's some really good anecdotes. Virgil, again, tell us that story. He was fascinated with raconteurs, the art of the raconteur in the modern age he loved, and old and new. And I think that the impact, well, like I reiterated at the very beginning of this conversation about the 30-year disparity, he was very much about that. He was very much about how ahead he was, and he's egoless. I've never met anyone who's got no ego. And he actually does not have an ego at all. I mean, it's fascinating how his brain on every level, he could control, a brand, several, through WhatsApp, to having no conversation, just gets it done. The ability to how he worked was just, Joe, just tell me what you want to do, how are we going to do it? Bam, I've got this. Okay, cool. Is that cool? You know what I mean? And it just fascinating brain. And I think the ableism, ableism and all these other things that are going to come out and have come out, I think future generations and universities, whether it's the highest of all accolades, this guy is by far one of the, for me, some Black Jesus shit, man, I'm telling you, man.
To me, he was a true icon, and just, personally thinking about sharing space with you and him, and then he passed away just a few weeks later. It's just, it's mind blowing to me. It was a moment.
That night, that particular night, that clubhouse, because I was really reluctant. And then obviously Ruba was on there, and I didn't realize, Jeff, I got to know after this, was like, man, this is like, it was a mind blowing evening, because he's like, Virgil's going to jump on. I mean, at the position he was in the world, to jump on for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
It just blew my mind. He's like, it's not just fleeting. He just came on and laid it out.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm indebted to the man and his spirit. And I think, we just dedicated the album to him. So I want to mention that, because the album, The Start of No Regret, comes out in May. Beautiful down-tempo, 127, 155 at a push. Tracks that could sit between you and me and Angel on Timeless quite comfortably. And if you never heard the album, you go, it's part of the album, right? Same thing. The idea of time travel, going through, 3 decades of music from Chicago house, the brushstroke.
That was where I cut my teeth on Chicago house back in the day.
There's a track on the album called Brushstrokes, which is like Cleveland Watkins on vocals, which is Chicago, like crazy, mad vocal male, killer shuffling, mad, just. And then you've got like Lady Blackbird, and you've got like Green Tea Pain, you've got like Tom Misch, and you've got all these. And I think it was the album that, Pete signed the album. Pete Tong, after 26 years, signed this album. He signed Timeless. People forget that. Tongy became a famous DJ, but people forget Pete Tong was an A&R man, and still is an A&R man at a record company. It's not London Records anymore. It's now 360 Records, and he signed this new album because he felt robbed, of that second album, because he knew he couldn't sell Mother. He was up against too many people. I mean, they made a film about it, right? It was a very terrible film, but the book's great. Kill Your Friends. It was the author. It was the writer. John Niven was the international marketing director at London Records at the time. It was a story of American Psycho meets a record company. And the name's changed, but I am DJ Rage, the guy that makes this opus for this great second album that no one gets to listen to. This unveil that doesn't do anything for 14 minutes. And that's the end of Schroeder's job, which is Pete Tong. That record company was crazy. I mean, it was insane. It was mad times in the 90s. But fast forward, this is a very, very prolific project because it's just effortless. I've just left the gravity of it all, man. I'm like, I've got nothing to prove. I've got nothing to. I'm out in the realms, man. I'm out in the ayahuasca realms. I'm good. I'm in dimensions. I can get to enjoy. People like going, oh my God, this album's like it's. You need a degree in music to kind of listen to. It's like going to listen to Mother or the Journeyman cover to cover, it's kind of like going to watch an opera.
Mm.
You know, you've got to be a music maker, or you've kind of got to wait for some more years to pass before you can understand it. It's like, I didn't like red wine, and I never used to like olives. Kind of like both of them a little bit. You know what I mean? It's with age, you get, you know, and that's where I'm at. The label, Metalheadz, deals with the latter, the present, like now. Young kids, oh yeah, here you go, grey coat. There you go. Before you get to me, you got to get through Phase, you got to get through grey code, you got to get through Stick Digital, you got to get through, you know. So that's what I love about the idea of what Metalheadz and why he was so important to Virgil, going back to the point. He understood the idea of crew, the idea of it takes a village.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the icon of Metalheadz. Metalheadz is not a record label. It's a crucible of ideas, of melting ideas that are galvanized through these young people.
Well, the icon, it's branding in its truest sense. It's how you feel when you see it. You know, people have tattooed it, you know, on their body. Like literally, I've seen people with Metalheadz.
Yeah, but I've seen some really bad share tattoos. Don't worry about it. You know, but yeah, I know, I get it. I see some really, you know, I've seen some really weird fan art with my face, but you know, the icon is the icon. You know, no one is bigger than the music. Not me, not Travis Scott, not any. I don't care what the you're making. No one is bigger than the music. And you know, the demographic. You know, Metalheadz would have been in America, it would have been a different thing because the demographic of state to state is just ridiculous. We're a tiny island. You know what I mean? But I love the idea that it's really weird because now it's more than ever. It's becoming this revitalization of the label and jungle and people and all these new kids are like, oh my God, you know, my dad turned me on to your music, and I played in Leeds on Saturday, and I did a solid 2-hour set, and just kids are like, oh my God, my dad turned me into this music, and and you're playing cutting edge music. It's integral. And it's important.
You know, speaking of that, you know, the current state of electronic music, drum and bass specifically, to me, it sounds almost the same as it did in the 90s. Like, do you agree with that, or am I missing something?
30 years of disparity.
Yeah.
We were making, I could play. I mean, I can see through the veil. I can see whether I'm listening to software turning or really bad plugins, or, you know, you haven't really patterned this right. You know what I mean? You get it. There are the fact it's living as a culture, and people are making really great music, and it sounds like it's current, and it's like, okay, but it sounds like it could come out 30 years ago. Well, that's because the nature of the beast of where we were making it then.
Yeah.
And we've given it a really good timeline, but it all comes back to us, which is brilliant. It comes back down to that thread, right? It's like the Old Testament. You know what I mean? Yeah. The book of the Maccabee, whichever way you cut it up. That's what it is. It's Maccabee shit. And I love that. And you know, I think we're at Movements in Detroit, me and Danny Bookham playing back to back, and that's going to be very interesting because I'm going to be dropping some Detroit bangers that are like, what the fuck? You know, like, did he just drop Kevin Saunderson straight out of hell? Like, did he really drop that against, you know, a really ridiculous D&B track with, with Grey Code? And, you know, and that's what it's about. It's about, you know, getting out of the comfort zone and really, you know, I actually can't believe that I actually enjoy it as much as I do. You know, still, you know, I'm like 56 and hurtling towards 57 thinking, you know what I mean? Like, what, you know, it's crazy. My daughter loves the music. My daughter's about to give birth, wants to wear my varsies. It's great. You couldn't be any better time in life, really. So yeah, it's good. Life is good. And I think that, you know, it's been, I just want to keep practicing until I get a lot older, and you know, as long as I can. And I you know, I think the one thing that I will leave you on is that, you know, I just signed Timeless, you know, last year to New Regency, and I'm just looking for a broadcaster now. You know, I think the coup de grace is here. You know, I think I've written my greatest work ever. With me and James as Subjective created 2 soundtrack albums. I've signed 3 albums to the soundtrack. 6 episodes are written. You know, Stephen Graham is a main lead. You know, I have written, and Virgil was the first person to read. Virgil was the first person to read Sine Tempus. And I still have the correspondence between me and him, where it was just like mind-blowing emojis for like the days, because he was reading up, going back from Chicago to Paris on 2 legs. And he said, this is going to split the atom. And I strongly believe that those words that he said kind of geared me on, because a lot of, you know, scared broadcasters are like, no, it's not for us. You know, it's like, well, that happened when you made Timeless, didn't it? You know, people didn't get it at first. And then Pete Tong went, I get it. You know, it's probably the most prolific story, you know, semi-biopic of my life, but a beautiful 3 stories all intertwined and a remarkable piece of work. So, you know, that's what my end game is, directing those 6 episodes, being left with the control, finding a broadcaster, and new Regency, who, you know, Regency are not fucking around. Regency are, you know, Ad Astra, Revenants, you know, and now moving into this TV arm, I'm hoping that we can find a good broadcaster moving forward. I mean, America will be out of the question, I think, but, you know, maybe there might be HBO, maybe there might be something, but I think the fact that America is looking at British culture again could be interesting because of what's happened with Top Boy and different things. But you have a prolific story within this. You have a great story of a boy who's mentally ill, trying to find his way. And that's what this is about. So I'll leave you on that note, unless there's anything else I have.
No. Listen, Goldie, I can't thank you enough for making time today. Glad we actually made this happen. It was profound. I mean, there was so much in there. So I thank you very much.
See you later.
All right. Bye-bye.